Good morning. Good morning. I am so excited for this morning. I am so excited. Welcome back, A Ginger in the Wild. I am super excited because we had part one, and it was really kind of funny because we were planning on talking about all this sex stuff, and then we kind of just talked about like how cool your life is. And we never got around to the cool sex part.
Yeah.
Like, that's not okay.
I know my husband thinks it's not okay when it happens to him.
I respect that. Good morning, Sarah Beth. I see you tuning in. Okay, so we are just going to jump into sex talk because that's what we're all here for. And that's my favorite thing to talk about. So we already warmed up like with, our hour-long discussion about how amazing your life is and how beautiful Costa Rica is and how stunning you are and how successful your channel is. I said all of these things. You just smile and nod. So I want to start with a couple of would you rather questions. Are you game? Okay.
Oh, totally.
Would you rather only get to have very loud sex or very quiet sex?
Oh, definitely loud. Actually, I have a funny story about that. So when my husband and I first got together and we moved in together, we were living in a semi-detached house that we were renting while we were waiting for our house to get built. And the couple next door was a really lovely older British couple, but they had a 20-something-year-old daughter living with them. She was a little bit mentally disabled, so she was a very nice girl, but I think she had no filter,
no filter.
So one day she came over. We didn't talk to her much. We didn't interact with her much. She came over and she knocked on the door. And when I opened the door, she goes, "Oh, I just had a question." She says, "How do you get a guy to respect you?" And I thought, well, that's a weird question to come next door and ask a random stranger. But, I had a couple of pieces of advice for her. But then out of the blue, she just said, "You guys are really loud when you have sex." And I said to her, "I'm sorry? I don't know what to say." What do you say to that?
Hilarious.
Yeah. My son once complained, my eldest son once complained, and my husband, Mike, said to him, "Son, if you don't hear that, you're not doing it right."
That's right. That's a good piece of advice. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Would you rather never be able to masturbate again or never get to eat solid foods again?
I really love solid food.
I know. I really love all these things.
I don't know. Is the masturbation with just me in the room, or?
Well, that's up to interpretation. Yeah.
I mean, these things matter.
In theory, you don't. As long as Mike's around, you don't need to have masturbation. But solid food's kind of handy.
I like to watch that. I'll have to go with solid foods though, because I need to eat or I get really hangry.
Well, I need sex or I get really hangry, so I respect that. Fort Worth always says that my mood is completely dependent on how many hours it's been since we had sex. Would you rather
that way about food?
Yeah. Would you rather have sex handcuffed or blindfolded?
Handcuffed, because I'm actually a lot like a dude. When it comes to sex, I'm a lot like a guy.
Yeah.
Visual stimulation is a really big deal for me. So I don't mind being blindfolded, but I prefer to be able to see what's going on.
I love that. Yes, yeah. I completely agree. We actually have that conversation a lot here too. Okay. So when you first had sex, and was it in high school? Were you a late bloomer? Was it the guy that you thought was going to be the love of your life. Tell me about like your sexy sex stories.
My cherry popping.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
It wasn't high school. I think I was grade 10 or 11 maybe. My boyfriend at the time, who actually, he was a very nice gent. We dated for 2 years. So he was my first.
Were you also his first?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We were both terribly awkward. Didn't know what the hell we were doing. I was very much a late bloomer. So we were both kind of, just totally unaware of what the hell to do. But it was good, and it got really good after.
Right.
So it was a very positive experience. He was a very nice guy. We remained friends well into adulthood. So it was a good experience. We experimented a lot once we got started. We experimented a lot.
When would you say, in a healthy way, when would you say you discovered that sex could be something that you would really enjoy? I mean, was it only once you started having sex? Was it because for me, my imagination was in overdrive long before I actually had sex.
Me too. My dad always had Penthouse sitting in the bathroom. I used to feel through those magazines in the bathtub all the time. And then when I was maybe 10, I came across, just in a field that I walked through to get to school, I came across this really, really hardcore pornographic magazine that's just been thrown in the field. And I was fascinated by this magazine. It had like step-by-step photographs of the act, right? And
wow.
At 10 years old, I'd never seen anything like that.
Right.
It was amazing to me, but I was like, could not put it down. I hid it in the attic of my parents. I hope my mom never sees this. I hid the magazine in the attic of our house for a couple of years, I think, just so I could pull it down whenever I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I wanted to hide it so I wouldn't get caught with it, but I wasn't ready to give it up. So I was always really kind of hypersexual for a long time.
Yeah.
Even before I started having sex. Yeah.
I remember I don't know how, I guess it was from like a video store or something, like maybe a movie poster or something like that. But I remember being like in about somewhere around the second grade or younger, and thinking about the movie Mrs. Robinson and how hot that was, which is especially funny for me because I have zero interest in younger guys. But there was something about, second grade me who thought, oh, that would be so hot to have this young college guy or whatever, chasing after me.
It's got to be the taboo of it, right?
I think
so. A lot of that is the taboo thing, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So from your high school boyfriend that was experimental and fun and a lovely gentleman, where did your sexual exploration go from there? What was the next step?
Well, I got married shortly after, 19, I got married. He was Eastern European, so his views on sex were very traditional.
Okay.
But he was voracious, right? Like he liked having sex a lot, even though it was roughly traditional. So I got a lot of sex with him. It wasn't until I left him and I was working at a strip club, so I was stripping. And that's when I didn't start having a whole pile of sex at that time, but I started exploring more like experimental sex concepts, mostly just to integrate into my stage show a lot. Right. Is tapping into what intrigues people, what gets them interested, what gets me money. Right. So that's when I started actually exploring some of that. And I had some boyfriends where I did some of that with them, but like I didn't have a lot of I didn't play around a lot. I wasn't really interested in the one night stand thing, doing a bunch of hopping around with a pile of different guys.
Right,
And a
right.
lot of the gents that I met were kind of a little bit afraid, I think, of how
Intimidated?
well, maybe
Yeah.
about how kind of fearless I was about sex. So I didn't always have a good experience trying that because
Yeah.
a lot of them would get kind of scared off by some of the things I'd suggest, but some of them were game. So I did okay. I had a couple that were really game and I learned a lot from them, but I mean, my body count is way lower than you would expect for somebody with my history, but
Right, right.
but
Exactly.
I plumbed the depths of the few that I slept with pretty good, I think.
I respect that. I respect that. What do you feel like were your biggest eye-opening takeaways from your time stripping and just what you learned about what really turns men on, maybe visually, maybe just from the sake of a stage show, but also actually one-on-one, what you learned from other girls that you were working with, you know, what kind of stuff did you learn in that experience? Because I feel like a lot of women have kind of the deep seated desire to be on stage in that way and to just be so desired and objectified.
Mhm.
Few will ever act on it, but I feel like that really is a fantasy for a lot of women, whether they would ever admit it or not. But so I'm so curious into your experience there, what it taught you, what kind of eye-opening stuff you learned, and you know how that kind of took you to your next level.
Yeah. I learned how simple guys are.
Yeah.
They're not
That's
complicated,
fair.
right? Men, the thing that I found the most common was men really like, well, in a sexual way, men really like women who like sex.
Yeah.
Right? Like women who are into it, women who are interested in them. I think it's an interest thing, right? And even the ones who didn't even care about sex, like I had some customers that were regular customers that didn't even ask me to dance with them. They just wanted to talk, right? I
Yeah.
think with men, a lot of what attracts them is a woman who is interested in them, right? Someone who pays attention to them. Sometimes that attention is like triple X style. Sometimes the attention is just attention, just care and love,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that interested me a lot, actually. I love psychology. So I've read a lot of psychology. I always am fascinated by why people do the things that they do. So one of the weirdest things that I took from it was the number of guys that would pay me just to sit and chat with them and not
Right.
actually want to see me naked. That surprised me a lot, actually. And I found it kind of sad because a few of them are people that were married for a long time and they just didn't feel appreciated or cared for at home. So here they are, and I'm a virtual stranger, right? And they're spending hard earned money just to get a little bit of attention from somebody who's not going to judge them.
Right.
So that was a really kind of a sad thing, but also it made me feel a little bit good that I could do that because there are a lot of girls at the club that are just there for the money, right? But I actually really enjoyed some of the conversations I had with some of those gents, right? I learned a lot of things too from people who are really smart. So it was reciprocal somewhat, right? Like it was nice to spend time with somebody who didn't just want to see me naked. So
Yeah.
it was a nice little exercise in human psychology. But
Well,
also,
it is fascinating that you say that because it's been a while since I've seen her on Twitter. I think she's off now, but there's a Canadian prostitute that I follow on Twitter, and she used to at least go by the pesky prostitute. And I remember her saying this same exact thing that oftentimes it would surprise you that men just truly just wanted company.
yeah,
I do remember a post because Fort Worth and I talked about that.
non-demanding company, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody who's not nagging you to do the dishes or somebody who's not saying, when are you going to give me a ring? Right? Like non-demanding, non-judgmental company.
Yeah.
It taught me a lot actually about how to be a good girlfriend, how to be a good wife even, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something that a lot of men, I think, miss out on. It's one of the reasons that marriages fail is because women don't understand that sometimes it's so easy to make a guy happy. You just have to kind of give him what he needs and do it without bitching, right? Like
it's a detail. Well, that's like we always say, just be agreeable. That goes so far in the relationship, pleasure field. Just don't be a cunt. Like literally.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, I'm not a very agreeable person, right? Like I'm probably one of the most disagreeable people there are, right? Like I'm Ted Kaczynski style disagreeable, right? But I can be very agreeable in the right environment, right? Like if I feel appreciated and I feel safe and I feel like I have somebody's loyalty, I could be the most agreeable person there is, right? Like I'll give 120% to the person that gives me 90. You know what I mean?
Right.
As soon as I feel unappreciated, then I become a righteous cunt. Like you don't even know. Some people know. My two
well, thankfully, I'm
know.
on your good side right now. There's one place I hate to be, and that's on the bad side of a woman who's pissed off. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while, I'm like, oh God, what did I just do?
Especially a woman with a mouth like mine, because there's not a lot that I won't say.
Oh,
we have some comments.
Oh, that's funny. So we had one just jump on just as I was saying, don't be a cunt. So it seems fitting. It seems very Australian welcoming. I love that. Oh, we're getting some great comments. So so what made you stop stripping? How long were you in that field?
About a year and a half. And
okay.
Then, I just wasn't making enough money at it for the demand of time that it was. And the truth is, everybody thinks, oh, well, you're good looking. Why weren't you making good money? Well, if you're working at a club where 90% of the gals are willing to give a blowjob for $20, but you're not willing to give a blowjob for $20, you're not going to make money. So, like, I always had a hard line on anything that would be classified as prostitution, right? Like anything that would have got me arrested.
Yeah. I
wasn't going to do. Like, I was in the stripping for the money, the flexible schedule. And because I really enjoyed, like, I enjoyed being the object of voyeurism, right? Like I like doing things for show. So I was in it for that, but I was not interested in selling out my everything for a few bucks, right? Like I wasn't going to become a prostitute. That was not for me. Right. So, but when you're competing against girls, a club full of girls that are all willing to do that, you make less money.
Sure.
Right? Like you're going to be less in demand. It doesn't matter how good looking you are.
Right. Right.
So it just got to I was doing it while I was in school. Once I finished my classes and got a proper job, it just wasn't worth it. Right? Like it was long hours and it was the club that I was comfortable at was far away from where I lived. So it took a lot of commuting. And at the time I was a single mom to my son who was like 2.
Oh, wow.
So being away from him. Yeah. Being away from him for that long when I wasn't even making good money, it was just not worth it. So I quit.
Right. What was your favorite, what were your signature moves? Did you have any things that you always did that you knew would get the attention?
Yeah. So my stage show was always a 3-song set. So you'd do 2 songs that were relatively fast and then you'd end with a slow song. That was kind of the format.
Yeah.
And I would always, most of the time, my final song was always Clean by Depeche Mode, which is a really great, sexy time song.
I love it.
yeah, just the rhythm of it and the sound of it was always put me in a really hot mood. But I would dance super slow to that, and then I'd always end the song with like a big pitcher of ice water. I'd just be sprawled out on the stage and just pour it. So like I'd be all the girls that came on stage after me were so pissed because they're like, the stage is all wet. I'd have to clean the stage after, which was less sexy, but you know. That was awesome. Always a very popular move. Yeah.
That's very flash dance of you. I love it. It was hot for a reason. That's a hot move.
I mean, the behind the scenes take on that is they didn't even realize half the time I did it because I spent so much time in those first two songs working up a sweat that I was stinking hot.
Yeah.
Right? So I'd put the ice water, it would cool me off, bring my body temperature down so I wouldn't pass out. But it also ended up being kind of sexy. So
that is awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So a night like that, when you were, and I know it's been a bit, but would you did a 3-song set on stage.
Yeah.
How much like milling around did you do? Like was that the end of your night once you would dump ice water on yourself, or did you have to go back out and be presentable?
No, because I did freelancing, so I could come and go as I wanted. But the stage, when you did freelancing, the club that I worked at said you had to do at least one stage show. The stage show though generates interest, right?
Yeah.
So you'd try to get that in close to the beginning of the night if you could. It depended how many girls were there, right? Because you would have a slot, right? The DJ would determine where you went in the line. So if you got it close to the beginning of your evening, then you could make your bank on the rest of the night from anybody who saw the show, right?
Yeah,
so, like right after the stage show is when I would get the most of my money for the night, for maybe the next hour or two for sure.
I can see that. This is a good one. Yeah. This is a good one. Let's see. A quick wipe of your chin would have been a cheeky but apt reply to the girls complaining. I love that. So after you finished stripping, what did you, and you got a real job and had finished your classes. So what did life look like then? You're a single mom. How much dating were you able to do? How much more like sexual exploration were you able to do? What did life look like?
Yeah, not a whole lot of dating. I don't actually like dating very much. I have a very low tolerance for bullshit.
Yeah.
So dating, especially the dating scene, and this was before even there were dating apps and internet, right? Like, so I actually got lucky. It was still really bad back then though, because it was a lot of the same problems we have now, but without the amplification of the internet. Yeah. So, I always had a really low tolerance for bullshit. So dating didn't always go well for me because guys found me really often too aggressive, right? Uh-huh. Like I actually had one boyfriend. He complained because I moved around too much during sex, right?
Like you were too active. You were actually actively involved, which he had never experienced before. Apparently,
he was Italian and he had very traditional ideas about relationships, right? So for me to be as enthusiastic as I was
right.
I found that alarming, and he actually complained, right? Like he complained. My husband has nicknamed him the Putz.
His loss.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I dodged a bullet with him. I mean, he left me, but I dodged a bullet with him because we would not have been happy for sure. If he was already upset because I moved around during sex, that wasn't going to work out.
It was only going downhill from there.
Yeah.
Next, he would complain that you actually wanted sex in the first place.
Right? Yeah.
Have you ever had a boyfriend or husband who complained about that you maybe were aggressive to the point of wanting sex when they didn't want sex or anything along those lines?
My second husband, my last before Mike, didn't complain about it so much as he had a really hard time. He took a lot of medication for anxiety and depression.
Gotcha.
So he had,
that can really mess with your sex drive.
yes. So he had a lot of problems with that, to the point where he had to take medication for that, right? Like the little blue pill. And even then, his enthusiasm level was always very low. So I wouldn't say he complained about it, but I did find myself feeling often like I was pushing him into it just to get it, right?
Right.
Yeah. He was very passive aggressive. So he would never complain openly about it. I would always just get the impression that he felt beleaguered. So let's just say.
Oh, yeah. I get that. I mean, I get that because I know that, especially if there were medications like anxiety kind of things going on or running in the background, there's only so much that Viagra and the like can do to overcome either the anxiety itself, the conditions that cause the need for medication, plus the medication. There's just so much that has to be overcome in order to really allow yourself to enjoy the sexual act and to get into it. And truly with men, it's as much that they cannot get erect, aroused. And, at least with women, there are kind of fixes that you can work around if you're available, if you're willing, even if you're not in the mood, which, by the way, never happens with either of us. But in general, there are workarounds for women. There are not workarounds for men, which is unfortunate. Well,
in my defense, he slept with my best friend, so he obviously didn't have too much trouble. If he was properly motivated, right? So,
yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. There were obviously other problems that were affecting his attractiveness to me.
There you go. Cool. How did you deal with that? How does someone of your caliber deal with something like that?
My caliber?
Yes.
I'm not sure what does that mean?
Highly attractive, highly sexual, sexualized, comfortable, you're clearly comfortable in your own skin and have the kind of confidence to back up what you're putting out there. So how in the world, in that nature caliber, how did you deal with that kind of thing? How did you deal with your boyfriend sleeping with your best friend?
Well, the thing was, we had a house together. We had 2 kids together, and he was basically, for all intents and purposes, father to my eldest child,
right.
My first husband. So we had a lot invested, and I am a very loyal person, right? Like for me, ride or die has always been kind of a thing, right? Like I always wanted a relationship where I could be like that. So for me, I was devastated. It was terrible, but I was determined that I wasn't just going to throw it all away. Right. So, I asked him, what are you missing? What can I do differently that this isn't going to be an issue for you, right? Like that you're going to get what you need. So I was determined to work on the problem. And we did for another 2 years before I realized the problem actually really wasn't me. A lot. Wow. Every relationship that fails, everybody has a role in it, right? Like I have my issues too. Right. So don't get me wrong, but the problem was he just was incapable of being honest, right? The passive aggressive part of his personality just made it impossible for him to be honest with me ever. Yeah. So whenever there was a problem, he wouldn't address it. So I couldn't address it because half the time I didn't even know it was a problem.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
So it went downhill within 2 years after that. And I realized there's just no saving this. If I can't be with somebody who can't be honest with me, I'd much rather, like we talked in our last talk, my husband now, Mike, if I say to him, do these pants make me look fat? And they do, he's going to say yes, right? Like, and some women can't handle that. But for me, it's such a refreshing change. Yeah. It's so good, right? Like I need a man who's going to be honest with me, even if the honesty hurts my feelings, because I'd rather be better, right? Like I don't want to pretend that I'm fine and don't need improving. So I'd rather be better. It's you create intimacy and connection when you can be honest like that with somebody. So yeah, the truth is now though, I mean, I've had 2 husbands, both cheaters.
Yeah.
And so poor Mike now would never get a second chance, right? Like I gave the last one a second chance, but Mike, he has official orders now. If that ever happened with him, he would be out the door. There would be no second chance. I'm not making the same mistake again, right? Like it was a mistake. If somebody cheats on you, they're never going to not cheat on you again. It's just, they're not. I fully believe that.
Well, I've watched Mike plenty in y'all's videos. I think that you guys have a pretty freaking secure relationship.
Oh yeah,
I think he's pretty crazy about you.
Mike's never going to cheat on me. That's for sure. We might. I mean, we have our issues, but that's never going to be one of them for sure. It's one of the reasons why he's lasted longer than anybody else before him, right? Because I don't have to worry about that, that's makes our relationship better and our sex hotter, is because for me that's a big worry. It's always been a really big worry, but to not have to worry about that, like I feel completely safe to let go and do whatever he wants, pretty much.
Then you can play and explore and just be completely free. I love that.
Well, you got a boob shot there by accident.
Yeah, baby, you know that's my favorite kind.
I paid good money for these, so I'll show
that's right, exactly. gotta make the most of them. So I have a question that pertains to, once you found out your second husband was cheating, and but you still stuck with it for 2 years, were you in the back of your mind, because I believe that most women do this thing that I'm going to ask you about, myself included. I have done this before as well, where yes, you're trying to work through it, yes, you're hopeful that it survives, but were you also in the back of your head, if not in action, making next step plans for those 2 years?
I really wish I had.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I really wish I had. Because I didn't. And I look back now on that experience and I think how many things that I should have done differently.
Right.
So that I could have said, because when it finally did fall apart and I left, I was mostly scrambling just to keep my life together, keep my kids sane. Right. And if I had prepared better, then my kids' lives would have been better, I think. But I didn't, because I was determined. See, for me, I'm one of those people that if you build a parachute plan, you'll take it. I'm one of those people that I know myself. I know if I build a parachute plan, I will take it. This is one of the reasons why when we moved to Costa Rica, we sold everything. Like lots of people say, oh, no, keep a place over there just in case it doesn't work out. I said, well, if I do that, then the first time it gets really hard, I'm going to bail because I have a parachute. Right. So I know I need to live no parachute, no safety net, because then I'm going to make it work, whatever it takes. Right.
Yeah.
So when I decided that I was going to try to work it out with him, I didn't build a parachute, but I should have. That would have been one of the few times, and not for my sake, really, honestly, for my kids. I should have done that for them.
Sure.
I feel really guilty about how much trouble they had because I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But like, I honestly feel like if I'd done that, it would have been for sure doomed. And I wanted it to at least have a chance of success.
Right. Right. So up to the point that we're at in your timeline right now, we haven't met Mike yet. You've had 2 husbands. You've had a stripping career. Like all kinds of hot stuff is going on. And
red flags everywhere. I even have the red flag hair.
Yeah. Which is fabulous, by the way.
Thank you. I redid the color today because I think you saw my disaster a couple days ago.
I was cracking up when you were sharing your pictures online. I was cracking up. You're such a mess.
Terrible. My daughter said to me, she goes, "You look like the girl from Lazy Town." And then she looked up Lazy Town, an image, and showed me. I was like, oh my God, she's right. Terrible.
That's all she had to say, and that fixed it all. So up to this point in your timeline, what is the single hottest sexual experience that you can think of? Who was it with? Was it with a boyfriend? Was it with a husband? Was it with a perfect stranger? Like, walk me through what that hot sex was like, and about what age would you have been too?
Oh, age is a tough call.
Yeah.
I can't actually remember. It was Mike. It was Mike for sure. He's been the best sex I've ever had, just because I feel so safe with him. We can do anything. And he's very hypersexual, right? Like he enjoys having sex with me. So, and he's willing to do almost anything too. So we've always had really good sex. But it was definitely with him. We used to, back in the early days of our relationship, we would go to fetish clubs sometimes.
Yeah.
That was never a thing for him, right? Like his ex-wife was very stiff.
Yeah.
So he'd never been to anything like that. I had always used to, back even in my dating days, would go to fetish clubs just because the sexually charged environment around there was always, I was always more comfortable in a space like that, even though, I mean, there a lot goes on in those places that I would never dare try.
Right.
Some people are actually crazy, but the sexual charge in a place like that it's very kind of, what's the word? It's like a narcotic.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
It makes you feel more alive. I always felt that way. So I've frequented those clubs on a regular basis before. So I introduced him to that. It was so outside of his experience, but he was really game. Like,
yeah,
he was like, oh, whatever's going to increase sex for us, I'm all in, right?
It's a win-win.
Yeah. A couple of them were clubs where you could actually engage in sex there. We've done that in front of other people. That was really good.
Yeah. Well, that just increases the hot factor to add the voyeurism to it, to add that exhibitionism.
I'll be honest, I actually felt a little self-conscious though, which was weird for me because
fascinating.
I've never felt self-conscious before, but maybe because of the relationship we had. For somebody else to be watching our intimate time, it felt different. But I mean, we still did it. I wasn't gonna not. Yeah. But one time after one of those club nights, we were heading home, and we lived out in the country at the time. So we were out on a country road. It was completely deserted. It was winter time. So it was a really beautiful light snow falling. And it was pitch black. We were out on this deserted country road, and we just pulled over, and he took me on the hood of the car.
I love it.
In the snow. And it was absolutely he was wearing a kilt, which I love. And I was dressed in my night outfit. Oh, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just I'm making sure. So that was probably the best sex we've ever had. It was incredible. Really good. It felt like we were the only people on the planet at the time, just because it was so quiet. But it was out in the open, right? Like you're not supposed to do that. So it had that taboo factor.
I think that is something that is so incredibly arousing about sex outside is that taboo and just the feeling of the air around you. And like you're talking about, the snow is also falling a little bit. Like everything about that is just so, it kind of stimulates all the senses at once.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely the best time. But, and I think if you asked Mike, he would say the same, because he's mentioned it a few times before. I'm kind of sad that we live in Costa Rica now. There's never any snow, but you know.
I'd be sad about that too.
I mean, at the time when this happened, we had 6 kids living in our house, right? Like all of our kids were there. So for us to have like something as wild and hot as that, we had to kind of leave the house to do that.
Oh yeah.
So
that makes perfect sense. Well, and something that we talk about a lot here is that, you know, sexually based clubs, sex clubs, whether it's a fetish club, whether it's something specific or something a little bit more hardcore. There's such a just sexy vibe, whether you partake in anything on premises or whether you're just in that environment. Yeah. There is no better kind of nightclub to go to than this kind of environment because it is just so arousing.
Yeah.
You can't not have great sex around that time period, whether it's on premise or at home.
Yeah, I have a lot of straight friends, and I've always said to them, even if you don't have to be into fetish at all, right?
Yeah.
But go to one with your partner, because there's a couple things that make it different than your average nightclub, right? First of all, the sexual component is way amped up, right? And you're going to see things that actually you might never have been exposed to, and will intrigue you to try something new to start with. But also the environment in those spaces, and I mean, you sound like you've been to a few before too, right?
Yeah.
It's way different. Like I went to lots of nightclubs where you get people, they paw at you and they're rude and you get into fights, right? But I've never had that experience at a fetish club because everybody has an etiquette.
Everyone is super respectful.
Yeah, you never touch without asking first. No means no. Like I've never had a bad experience with a stranger at a fetish club, ever. And I've had people say to me, well, aren't they just perverts? Aren't they always just...
No, not at all.
Because the rules are really strictly enforced.
Yeah.
But most people there, they only want consensual experiences anyway, right? Your regular nightclub, you just get frat boy douchebags that are just drunk and want to just paw at you, right? So it's so different because then you can explore the things that you're interested in without the fear of A, judgment, or B, it going too far and then you can't stop it, right?
Exactly.
Like, so it's actually really liberating to feel free to do that with safety. So I always recommend
it. Really is.
Yeah, even straight people, go to a fetish night. Just go to a fetish night. You'll be surprised how much you enjoy it, even just for the show, right? Like
I agree completely.
Oh my God, I've seen some things.
What is the craziest or the most, even if it made you uncomfortable because it is something that maybe you wouldn't necessarily do yourself, what is the most outlandish thing that you've ever seen or had knowledge of in clubs like that?
So one time we were there and this young gal, she couldn't have been more than 19 or 20 maybe, really nice, slight build, right? And she went up on stage and they put these big meat hooks, like the meat hooks like a butcher has.
Yes.
Right through.
Oh God.
Here, underneath her kneecap. I mean, they did things on stage all the time. You could get a tattoo or a piercing done on stage for free if you were willing to do it on stage. So I mean, there was stuff like that all the time. These huge butcher's meat hooks right underneath her kneecaps. Oh. 2 of them, one under each one, and they were tied to these long, like suspension cords, like you would bungee jump with.
Oh my!
And they hauled her up, suspended by her knees.
Oh,
and then they pushed her. And she's like swinging back and forth across the stage, and there's blood pouring. She's suspended by her kneecaps. Right?
Oh my!
And there's blood pouring down her legs. I almost threw up that day.
Right? I can imagine.
I have a lot of friends in the body modification world. A lot of them have done things that like the old lady in me was going, that girl's gonna walk again, right? Like.
Oh,
they had to carry her off stage when she was done, right? Like she just kept swinging back and forth, and then they lowered her down, and they took the hooks out, and but they had to carry her off stage because she couldn't walk. And I'm like, you're 20 and you're doing that to your knees, right? Like,
oh my!
You're not going to be able to walk when you're 40.
Oh God!
So, stuff like that, I never loved. That's not sexual for me, right?
Right? No. It's what about that is even sexy? I don't even.
I mean, some people like pain. They like pushing the edges. I understand that because, like, I like my fair share of discomfort during sex, but that's way past my line, right?
Yeah.
I once went to a night where this dude had his wife on, it was like not exactly a cross, right? Like they have them tied up and they're leaned over, right? And he had these huge gloves on, and he was smacking her tits and stuff, smacking her ass like really hard, like harder than I would like. And I like myself a good smacking. But and at one point I was sitting right next to where they were doing this, and he leans over and he goes, touch these. And I'm like, okay. So I'm touching his gloves, and they were oil riggers gloves. So anybody who's done oil rigging, they're these really hard gloves, and they have these, it's almost like a texture on them, like sandpaper. So grip, but he's smacking her with these on. I was like, holy shit, this was next level crazy.
Yeah.
Right? That's gonna leave marks.
Yeah. you know, she's used to dealing with that though.
Well, oh yeah, whatever floats your boat. I would never go that far, but yeah, it was fascinating though. I learned a lot of things.
It is interesting how experiences like that kind of teach you where your boundaries are, because there's that ick factor that when you're not aroused, things are and gross and icky or too much. But then when you're aroused or in this highly sexualized environment, you kind of go, maybe, So it is interesting that even in that environment, you kind of go, okay, yeah, that's definitely a boundary marker.
Yeah. But you meet some interesting people.
Oh yeah.
For sure. So,
how did you meet Mike?
Well, I think we talked about this in our last talk, right? Because and
you had 6 kids between you at the time, correct?
Yeah.
Do you have any? You don't have any kids together, correct?
No.
Okay.
I was too old by that time. I wanted to have all my kids by the time I was 30, so that I could still enjoy my grandchildren while I was young.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
And he was already fixed by the time I got him.
Yeah.
Right? Because he was done having kids with his ex-wife. So. we considered for a while, actually, we really considered whether or not it would. I mean, we wanted to have kids together.
Yeah.
So we really considered having his vasectomy reversed, but it didn't seem practical in the long run because of our other kids. We didn't want any of them to feel like the one we had together was a favorite. Sure. And we didn't want such a huge age gap between them either. We just, with the custody schedules the way they were, having one all the time and then the other 50% of the time, it just felt like it was going to create a lack of harmony in the family.
That makes perfect sense.
We decided that wasn't going to happen for us. So sadly.
So was the sex always hot with you two? Was it like off the front end, it was always just supercharged?
Yeah.
Or was it something that you grew into? Because you said he wasn't as
he wasn't as experimental. No, he wasn't as experimental because he didn't have the opportunity. He was always really interested in sex. He always really enjoyed it, right? He was always very enthusiastic about it. He just hadn't explored the fringes of it with his ex-wife. So I gave him that opportunity, but no, it was always hypercharged from the very beginning. We have a really good chemistry, like right off the bat. I remember one time we went out for lunch, and this was when we were still technically considered each other friends. We weren't even pursuing anything, right? Because we were still going through our own things with our exes, right? Still just kind of pulling away from them. So we weren't pursuing anything, but we were out at lunch as friends. And then at the end of lunch, we just hugged. I'm a hugger, so I hug everybody. But the electrical charge from that hug was just, it blew my mind. And I remember calling him like an hour after, and I said, I just have to tell you. And when I told him how I felt about it, he goes, I felt exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So we had chemistry right from the very beginning. It was like really strong too. Like I couldn't believe how different I felt as soon as I touched him, right? Like
exactly.
It was really different. And I've never had that experience with anybody before.
Yeah. That is awesome. And I can only assume it's only gotten hotter. And what is the most, let's see, the craziest place that you've ever had sex? Because there's certainly the outside, situation that was off the charts, memorable, hot, but like speeding down the highway at 60 miles per hour, like, what?
Yeah, we've done that. We've done that.
I feel like we need to play one of those games where you're like, have not, have, with the signs,
There's not a whole lot of have-nots. There's not a whole lot of have-nots.
Would not.
Yeah, we've done the driving down the highway thing. I wouldn't recommend that, though. It's really not safe.
It's really not safe. It's that's one of those things that you definitely do when you're younger, and you think afterwards, that was a terrible idea.
Yeah. I think of I could probably get in shit from some people because you're technically placing other people in danger when you're doing that too. But
right,
it worked out for us. So
yeah. Nobody died. We didn't get any tickets, and we didn't have any car accidents. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
What do you think is kind of the best sexual advice that you can give to couples? Because you and Mike have been together a while. You've been through raising kids and having a house full. Like you've truly lived a great life, and it's only getting better. So what do you think the best advice is for people from a sexual standpoint to keep their relationship sexy and strong and,
keep working at it.
Keep working.
Don't get complacent, right? Like don't just roll over missionary style for 5 minutes and then go to sleep and think that that's going to work.
Right.
It will for a while, but at some point it won't. Yeah. Right. And also don't be overly judgmental and don't be afraid, right? Like one of the biggest reasons we have such a good sexual relationship, me and Mike, is because I'm comfortable telling him when I'm interested in trying something, and he's comfortable in telling me, well, that's not gonna, I'm afraid I'm not comfortable with that. Right. Like, and it's, then I'm okay. Right. Yeah. Like if he says, well, I'm not comfortable trying that, I'll be honest, I don't know if he's ever said that. But if he did,
I think that there's a trust factor there that he knows if you're asking him to try something, it's not for no reason, it's and that you're respectful enough of him to understand that if he says, even midway through trying this new thing, you're going to stop, Yeah.
So, it's communication is a really big deal. And that sounds like a trope, but it's true, right? Because they can't read your mind. Right? As much as lots of women want that, they want a man who can read their mind. And that's a recipe for disappointment because men can't read your mind. And no matter how much you think you can't read a man's mind either.
Right. Nor would you want to.
Yeah. If you guys can talk about it and there's none of that, ew, you want to do what? Right? Like, that's not the response that's going to get you a positive outcome ever. Right?
No.
Even if it's something that you're not interested in, a response that is judgmental is never going to open doors for you in your relationship. Right?
Right.
You need to be open about it and not afraid. Lots of things sound scary until you do them and then you realize that's not such a big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
What is your favorite sexual position?
It changes over time.
What is it right now?
It used to be doggy style because I really love it when my hair gets pulled.
Yeah.
Well, Mike's not that comfortable pulling my hair, actually. He's a bit afraid that he's going to hurt me. I keep saying, you're not going to hurt me.
He says those funny things.
I was like, hurt me? I hope so. But, no, but also, and this is part of the conversation your audience won't appreciate, but it's a real thing. I think with the onset of menopause coming, my pelvis is tilting. Lots of times during my period, my pelvis will tilt. That's always been a thing for me. And it's actually sometimes uncomfortable now for me when we do it doggy style, which is disappointing.
Right.
I always really liked it, but you got to go with what works. So I like being on top in the sitting position, right? With both of us in the sitting position. That's my favorite way. I get the most stimulation that way.
Very hot.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be my favorite, I think, for now. But I'm sure it will change, right? Like physiologically,
absolutely.
change.
You just go through seasons for one reason or another, whether it's something menopausal or pelvic tilting, you know, whatever the reason. Sometimes you just get bored with something, or you get stimulated by something else that maybe was unexpected. So
I like missionary a lot too, because then I like it when he chokes me.
Yeah.
So he could choke me effectively that way too. So I you know what? There's actually not a bad way.
No, that's hot. That's hot. And there are all kinds of. I think that missionary gets a bad rep sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's considered so boring, but it's only boring when you make it.
You can make it interesting. I can still put my feet up by my ears. Right.
There's a lot to be said for.
You can make it interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Yeah. But there's so many different ways that you can change missionary. That's more than, you know, what you imagine like Ricky and Lucy doing on I Love Lucy, you know, in their twin beds. I mean, it's just,
oh my God,
you know, it's just a whole different scenario than what our grandparents probably did.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. My grandmother was a pistol. I bet she did.
Was she?
Yeah.
Is that where you got it? Are you most like your grandmother?
I hope so. I think so. I'm a nice combination of my grandmother and my grandfather, actually. So I've all had his skills and drive, and I have her dirty mind.
So, oh, awesome.
I think that works out.
Oh my gosh, I love it. How often, because I love to ask this question, and this will be my last question, and then we will wrap up. I know you're melting. You're in Costa Rica.
No, I'm actually fine now.
I always love to ask, especially super high sex drive, happy, connected couples, you know, how frequently do you on average have sex or have sex play? Because I don't think that sex has to always be penetration, you know.
Yeah,
so how frequently do you and Mike get to have sex?
Lately less. And it's mostly only because we don't sleep very well right now. And we have so much going on the farm.
You do?
Yeah, it's been difficult. Mostly just tired. I mean, we play through the day all the time, right? Like there's always a little groping, and there's always sexy talk and hand holding and kisses, right? So we're
the chemistry's definitely there.
Yeah, we're still physically in contact a lot, but like oftentimes we're just both too exhausted.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that once our bedroom project is finished, that will improve.
That'll be big.
Less really physically manual labor to do. He's doing a lot too, right? Like doing a lot of the property maintenance. So we're still trying to find our groove right now. But we're both mutually kind of, we've talked about it because I say to him, is this going to be a problem? Because I don't want him to feel neglected. He's like, damn it, Teresa, I'm tired too.
Yeah.
So we're both going to mutually, that's going to take the back burner while we get projects done for now, and then we'll get back to it later. So we're fine about it. And sometimes we'll summon the energy to get it done anyway, just because we miss it. But it used to be, before we moved to Costa Rica, it was almost every day for sure. And sometimes
what is your ideal number for your fitness, for your energy, for your desire? What is your ideal number a week?
Oh, no less than 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think, right? Like
I think that's a really good, healthy number.
Yeah. It's a 3 or 4 of something, right? Like even if it's just I roll over and give them a blowjob.
Yeah.
Right? Like something. So it would be nice to get back to that. our old pace of like almost every day probably isn't sustainable in the long term. Who knows? But the thing is, we really enjoy our intimate time together.
Yeah.
Right? So there's lots of times when, even though we're exhausted, we'll still spend 10 or 15 minutes cuddling in bed, just laughing and talking to each other. Right?
I love that.
And
I love
that's
that.
good too. So, like, I don't think either one of us feels like we're missing out too much because we still have that. If that went, like, I would know there was a problem if that stopped happening. That would be
Absolutely.
a problem for both of us, I think. So for now, it's just
That would be
a
a
time
huge
and energy thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys have a lot going on right now. And like you said, alongside your bedroom actually being one of the projects. I mean, it's hard to, but once you have your sanctuary the way you want it, I'm sure that you will make up for lost time.
Well, that's part of the problem is the room right now that I'm in, our studio, was our temporary bedroom before. And this is a dingy, dark, terrible space. It's terrible to be in. It's fine to sleep in because it's very dark, right? But it doesn't inspire sexiness at all, right? So, like, it was really hard to get in the mood. I really need my space and environment. Like, for me, I need the visuals and the atmosphere to be there.
Yeah.
I can get turned on in other, like, non-sexual spaces too, but it is harder for me, right? Like, to summon it up, I really need the environment to be prepped.
Yeah.
In a way that brings that out in me. And this space did not inspire that. So now that we've moved up to our bedroom, even though it's still in construction, it's actually improved now because now I have light, and I feel like I have more space, right? Like, if I feel like I'm gonna hit my head on the ceiling, I'm not gonna get too vigorous, right? Like, it's intimidating. So
exactly.
It's already improved just moving upstairs. The only problem is now I have like these terrible wasps.
Oh no!
I already got stung in the forehead by this terrible wasp up in our new bedroom. So until I have actual walls, it's still going to be a challenge. So
well, I look forward to you posting what your finished product sanctuary looks like, and for sharing it all. I think Ake here says it perfectly. Thank you for sharing your space and relaxed and free-flowing chat. It really has been a great conversation. I'm glad we got around to the sexy sex talk.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for being willing to give me a whole other hour of your time away from the projects.
No, I love having these conversations, and you always ask interesting questions. Not a lot of people feel confident asking stuff like that, right? Like, and no matter how many times I say, I'll answer almost any question, right? Like, lots of people feel too intimidated. They're like, "Ooh, I can't ask about that." So it's nice to have somebody who's fearless.
Thank you. I do. It is my favorite subject. So people think that I'm kidding when I say that, but it really is. It's just a great topic of discussion, and I truly find it as such a key component to healthy relationships that last a lifetime or as long as you want them to. So, I mean, I think it's such a subject that people tend to gloss over and assume that it'll just work itself out, and it just doesn't do that. Like you said, you have to work at it, and people want to go into business and are willing to work at that. They want to, be better at a hobby or a craft, but they'll work at that, and yet they expect the relationship to be something that you just kind of happens. Yeah. And that's where people get lackadaisical. Yeah. So thank you, you sexy beasts. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, all of you who tuned in live. Thank you for all of the great communication in the chat. That makes me so blissful. It's just unbelievable how excited I get for people chatting and commenting all throughout our shows. That makes me so happy. So thank you so much. And thank you for all of the experiences and things that inevitably will be shared in the comments down below.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you have a great day. From our sexy chairs to yours, we want you to win. Bye. I love it. Oh, it makes me so happy.